How to build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive. Part 11. Disassembly begins. The first thing to go is the reversing lever standard, followed by removing the wheel sets, revealing the first of many more problems to come. I'd better mention at this stage that I did know what I was buying when I bought this locomotive. I thought to myself, well, I can build one completely from scratch, but doing it this way is better. First of all, it's going to be quicker and less boring and tedious. Drilling and assembling the frames and stretchers is a really long-winded job, and it can take quite a while. Buying a part-finished model was intentional, because apart from it will make a great tutorial showing how the parts should fit together, and not all of them fit very well on this particular example, most of the bolts are far too long. And this is a very bad thing to do. Before starting the project, I do recommend buying this book, which contains instructions that you need to know in order to construct a Sweet Pea locomotive. The book contains the dimensions as well as the pages of text and diagrams that help with the building process. This image is reproduced with permission from T Publications. There have been 10 episodes that precede this one, but this is the first episode where I'm seriously dismantling the engine. This is the standard that supports the reversing lever, and it's had a fabricated bracket made for the underside. I'm going to change this bracket for the genuine cast gunmetal bracket, as shown in the book, basically because this bracket fell apart when I dismantled it. More about that in a future episode. And now it's top tip time. Whenever you assemble any mechanical parts using nuts and bolts, always make sure that the nuts and bolts are not too long. Have a look at this. All of the bolts are far too long. These weren't too bad, but a lot of them had been over-tightened, which generally damages the thread in the nut. The first nut came off the bolt quite well. I just spun it off with my fingers. The second one needed some help from a spanner because it was quite tight. And this is a pain. Before fitting nuts and bolts to things, make sure that the bolts aren't too long. Also, of course, over time they go rusty and make the job even worse. It's a good idea to buy bolts which are too long, because then you can use them for a variety of different jobs, but in this case they are miles too long. Always cut and clean up the end of the bolts that you're using to suit the job. Most of the nuts and bolts in this plastic box are damaged just by being over-tightened. It's very common. I'm not saying that you should leave the nuts and bolts loose, because then over time they will probably get looser and fall off. But do not, I repeat, do not over-tighten nuts and bolts on small models. I say this a lot and I do not apologise for it. It's really important not to over-tighten the bolts. These bolts are holding the keeper plates on, which stop the axle boxes falling out of the slots. The first one appeared okay. I undid it using 2 spanners and then spun the nut off using a screwdriver point like this. These sequences showing the removal of the keeper plates are all running at a higher speed, just to get through the job in a reasonable time. In reality, it took a while. I think about half an hour to remove the keeper plates, which is just wasted time. If the bolts had been shorter and the nuts hadn't been over-tightened, it would have been far easier. Also, if you look carefully, this nut is rusty. Or maybe it's some thread sealant. Don't use thread sealant on these sort of nuts and bolts. You can use thread locker because that releases and then everything's okay. The water pump eccentric is definitely in the way. The eccentric is loose anyway. I don't intend to fit an axle pump to this engine because personally I do not like them on small locomotives. Some of the fittings that have been used on this engine are diabolical. I mean, look at the state of this. It needs something a lot better than a cheap screw. It came out very easily. I would tend to replace this with a grub screw. There's a hole in the axle to locate the eccentric sheave. Even though I'm not going to use this eccentric sheave to drive a pump, I will fit a grub screw to hold it securely in place to the axle. With the eccentric strap now out of the way, the job does become easier, because I can use a socket ratchet wrench on the bolt head. It's important to mark the parts before you remove them. After cleaning the keeper plate with some Scotch-Brite, I've marked it with 2 letter R's. This one is the right rear axle box keeper. At first glance the axle boxes do look okay. The edges of them have been profiled to allow for some more movement. Over now to the other pair of wheels. The ratchet socket driver only seemed to work once the bolt had been undone a little way. And believe me, to start with, these were really tight, but thankfully it eventually came loose. Over now to the other one, which was even tighter, and once again, with a bit of effort, it did come loose. I won't be using most of the fittings, but possibly these will be okay. In case you're wondering what the lock-nutted bolt is in the middle of each keeper, this is something that's mentioned in the book. It allows the keeper plate to put a little bit of pressure on the bottom of the axle box to help prevent the mainspring mechanism from coming loose, just by being able to compress the spring a very small amount. If I do reuse these bolts, I will shorten them first. This, of course, was the last keeper plate to remove, and as usual, the very last part of the job doesn't go smoothly. I had to prise the bolts out of this one because of the pressure from the main springs. Finally, all of the keeper plates had been removed. And here, using a piece of Scotch-Brite or Scotch-Brite substitute, I'm cleaning up the last one. Because I'm going to be taking the coupling rods off these wheel sets, I don't want to get them mixed up, so as well as marking the keeper plates, I'm also marking the wheels. This says RF, right front. The markings on the keeper plates are self-explanatory. Right rear, left front and right front. The easiest part of this job was lifting out the wheel sets. The axle boxes are a very good fit in the horn slots. There doesn't appear to be much play in any of them, and they slid out of the chassis very smoothly. What have I achieved in this entire episode? I've removed the standard for the reversing lever and the wheels. Not a lot, really. The holes through the frames at this point are where the exhaust pipe comes from the cylinder to the T-piece up to the smoke box. Both of the holes are a mess, and besides, I'm going to modify them for a specific reason that I will discuss in a later episode. That is it for this one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.